The courtroom was unusually crowded that Tuesday morning. The steady hum of conversation echoed between the wooden benches, creating the familiar atmosphere of anticipation that accompanied every taping of Judge Judy's show. Spectators leaned forward, whispering about today's case, a young man accused of damaging property and intimidating a neighbor. The rumors said he was rude, loud, and full of attitude. So naturally, everyone expected a show. The bailiff, Officer Byrd, entered from the left side of the stage-like courtroom, holding a clipboard. "All rise," he announced in his steady baritone voice. Chairs scraped across the floor as the audience stood. Byrd continued, "This is case number 3, Peterson versus Hawkins." And then, as if summoned by the weight of those words, Judge Judith Scheindlin, known to millions simply as Judge Judy, walked briskly to the bench. Her black robe swayed behind her like a cape carried by her reputation. She sat down, scanning the room with the sharp gaze that had intimidated countless litigants before today. "Be seated," she commanded. The audience settled. At the plaintiff's podium stood Mildred Peterson, a soft-spoken woman in her early 70s. Her hands trembled as she clutched her paperwork. Across from her, waiting to be introduced, was the defendant. When Byrd motioned for him, a young man swaggered toward the stand with the air of someone walking into a party rather than a courtroom. He wore oversized sunglasses, sagging jeans, and a smirk that irritated the room instantly. This was Damian Hawkins, the rumored bully, the neighborhood nuisance, and today's defendant. Judge Judy eyed him with mild surprise. "Mr. Hawkins, you can remove the sunglasses," she said sharply. Damian chuckled, tilting his head. "What, these?" "They're part of my look," he responded, leaning arrogantly on the podium. A ripple of gasps and soft laughter moved through the audience. Judge Judy didn't so much as blink. "This is a courtroom, not a fashion runway. Take them off." He rolled his eyes dramatically but complied, tossing the sunglasses onto the podium with exaggerated annoyance. "Fine. Happy now?" "Much happier," she replied dryly. "Now let's find out why you're here." Mildred Peterson inhaled faintly, steadying herself. Judy gestured for her to speak. "Mrs. Peterson, tell me what happened." Mildred began quietly, "Your Honor, my next-door neighbor, Mr. Hawkins, damaged my garden fence. He was yelling at his friends outside at 3 a.m, and when I asked him to keep the noise down, he kicked the fence. Broke it clean in half." Judge Judy nodded. "And then?" "And then," Mildred added, voice trembling now, "he called me names. Terrible names. He told me to mind my business or he'd teach me a lesson. I was frightened." Judge Judy turned slowly toward Damian. "Did you say any of that?" Damian shrugged. "I mean, maybe. She's always in my business. Old people hear things wrong all the time." Gasps spread again. "Excuse me?" Judge Judy said evenly, her tone dangerously calm. Damian spoke louder. "I said old people hear things wrong. She always complains. It's like her hobby." Judge Judy leaned forward, folding her hands. "Mr. Hawkins, you will not disrespect the plaintiff in this courtroom. Do you understand me?" He smirked. "I'm just telling the truth. She nags everyone. She's lucky I didn't knock down the whole fence. It's a piece of junk anyway." The spectators murmured in disbelief. Mildred's eyes widened, shocked by his casual cruelty. Byrd subtly shifted his stance, sensing tension rising. Judge Judy inhaled slowly, once, deeply. Those who watched her show regularly knew that breath. It was the calm before the verbal storm. "Let's get something straight," Judge Judy began, voice crisp as glass. "You don't speak that way to your elders, and you certainly don't come into my courtroom behaving like a spoiled child who's never been taught manners." Damian snorted, clearly unimpressed. He crossed his arms and leaned back like a teenager forced to attend detention. "Whatever." Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. "Whatever is not an appropriate response in this courtroom." He opened his mouth to retort, but she lifted a single finger, a gesture tiny in movement, massive in authority. He fell silent. "Now," she continued, "did you break her fence?" Again Damian shrugged. I might have tapped it with my foot. Tapping, she repeated slowly, does not break a fence. He rolled his eyes again. Okay, fine. Maybe I kicked it. But the thing was practically falling apart anyway. Should have done her a favor. More murmurs. The audience shifted, sensing Judge Judy's patience thinning. Mrs. Peterson whispered, Your Honor, my late husband built that fence with his own hands. Damien muttered under his breath, he must have been terrible at building things. That was the moment the entire courtroom froze. Judge Judy's eyebrows lifted as if saying, You just made a grave mistake, Mr. Hawkins, she said in a tone that now carried noticeable steel. If you speak one more word without being addressed, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? He clicked his tongue. Yeah. I get it. No, Judy replied. You clearly do not. She turned to Bird. Officer, bring me the defendant's complaint summary. Bird handed her the folder. She flipped through the documents with swift precision before looking up again. Mr. Hawkins, she said, according to the police report attached to the file, when the officers arrived, you shouted at them as well. You said, and I quote, Get off my property, pigs. Is that true? Damien grinned as though proud of it. Yeah, well, they shouldn't have bothered me. Judy closed the folder. The sound was a soft click, but it echoed like thunder. You have a very bad habit, she said slowly, of thinking you're the smartest person in every room. Unfortunately for you, this is my room, and I assure you, you are not the smartest person in it. The room erupted with quiet, stifled laughter, which stopped immediately at Judy's raised hand. Damien shifted, suddenly less comfortable. Mrs. Peterson looked relieved that someone was finally standing up to him. Judge Judy continued, You strutted in here with sunglasses on like you're performing in a music video, not responding to a lawsuit. You've insulted a 70-year-old woman, mocked her late husband, and admitted to damaging her property. And you've done all of that in the span of 10 minutes. Damien tried to cut in. She exaggerates everything, Judy snapped her fingers sharply. No. Stop talking. He blinked, startled. She leaned forward. You are about to learn something very important today. And that lesson is that your actions have consequences. Real consequences. Damien's jaw tensed, and if you continue with this attitude, she added, the consequences are going to be far worse for you than a broken fence. The room went silent again. Even people who had attended multiple tapings whispered later that they had never seen Judge Judy so serious, so ready to pounce. Damien, however, still seemed unsure of the danger he was in. Now, Judy said, we are going to examine the damages. Mrs. Peterson, how much is the cost of the repair? Mildred held up a paper with shaky hands. $540, Your Honor. Judy took the estimate. This is from a licensed contractor? Yes, ma'am. She examined it. Very reasonable. The defendant will pay this amount. Damien scoffed. $500 for a piece of wood? That's a scam. Judge Judy waved the paper. This is a legitimate estimate. And it is your fault. Damien shook his head aggressively. Nah. She probably told them to charge more. She's lying to you. Judy's eyes narrowed. Do not accuse the plaintiff of lying unless you have evidence. Do you? He hesitated. Well, no, but then don't say it. He grumbled, I'm not paying anything. The audience collectively inhaled. Judy repeated, You're not paying anything? That's what I said. For the first time, Judge Judy smiled, but it wasn't the warm kind. It was the kind that made grown adults reconsider their entire life choices. Well then, she said softly, this is going to be far more enjoyable than I expected. Damien's smirk faded. She leaned back, evaluating him as if deciding how best to dismantle his behavior. Mr. Hawkins, you are under the delusion that you're invincible. That rules don't apply to you. That elderly neighbors are beneath you. That authority is something you can shove aside like that fence. Her voice lowered, carrying weight. You're about to discover exactly how wrong you are. And with that, Part 1 ends with tension hanging thick in the room, Damien realizing, too late, that his arrogance has triggered a response he is not prepared for. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Even spectators who usually attended tapings just for entertainment sat straighter, their attention anchored to the unfolding clash. Judge Judy had shifted from curiosity to full disciplinary mode, a stance every longtime viewer recognized immediately. When she entered that mindset, the outcome was inevitable. Someone was about to receive a harsh lesson. Damien Hawkins adjusted his posture, though his attempt at confidence was visibly cracking. The earlier smirk had melted into a thin, uneasy line. He wasn't entirely frightened, at least not yet, but the realization that his bravado was failing had settled over him like an unwelcome shadow. Judge Judy flipped the contractor's estimate onto the bench with a controlled motion. "Let's get this clear," she began, her voice as sharp as polished steel. "You broke Mrs. Peterson's fence. You admit kicking it, and you mocked her for caring. Therefore, you are responsible for the damages. This is not complicated." Damien let out a sarcastic laugh. "I said I kicked it, but it wasn't even that big of a deal. Y'all act like I burned her house down." A few audience members shook their heads. Berg glanced at Damien the way someone might look at a person who keeps stepping into deeper water without realizing they can't swim. Judge Judy smiled faintly, the kind of smile that spelled imminent doom for the defendant. "Mr. Hawkins," she said calmly, "property damage does not require the house to be on fire. You damaged something that was not yours. End of story." "But," Damien started. "No," she said brusquely. "Not but. You do not get to rewrite events simply because you don't like the consequences." She turned to the plaintiff. "Mrs. Peterson, did you witness him break the fence?" "Oh yes, Your Honor," the elderly woman said, her voice trembling just slightly. "He did it right in front of me. I was standing on my porch. It was very loud, and he yelled after he did it." Judge Judy nodded. "And did he threaten you?" Mildred swallowed. "He said I should keep quiet or he'd make me. I didn't want trouble, so I went inside." "But you filed this claim," Judy observed. "Yes," the woman replied, glancing nervously at Damien. "Because he kept doing things like that. I'm afraid in my own home now." Damien scoffed loudly. "That's ridiculous. Nobody's afraid of me." Judge Judy fixed him with a look so icy the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She is. And after observing your behavior for the past 20 minutes, I can see why." His jaw clenched. "I'm just being real." "You're being disrespectful," Judy corrected. "And that's a habit you've probably gotten away with for far too long." The defendant muttered something inaudible. "What was that?" Judy asked sharply. "I said people take everything so seriously," Damien replied. "It's not my fault they're sensitive." Judy stared at him a long moment. "Mr. Hawkins, let me explain something to you. Actions have weight. Words have power. The only one who seems unaware of that is you." He straightened, as if trying to salvage some remaining pride. "Look, I'm not paying $500. That's crazy." Judy's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You keep repeating that as though saying it enough times will magically erase your responsibility. It will not." He threw his hands up. "So what, I'm supposed to empty my wallet because she's mad about some old wood?" Judy leaned back in her chair. "You're going to pay because you caused the damage. That's how the legal system works." Then she paused, letting her words linger in the air before continuing, "And judging from your attitude, I suspect this is not the first time you've disrespected someone simply because you thought you could." Damien shifted uncomfortably. Looking away, Judy picked up the police report again. "Let's revisit this. The officers who arrived that night filed a complaint. According to their statement, you not only yelled insults at them but also refused to give your ID. Why is that?" "Because they were on my property," he shot back defensively. "They came because she called them. She's always calling people on me. I wasn't doing anything wrong." Mrs. Peterson raised her hand weakly. Your Honor, I only call when things get out of hand. And that night he was threatening me. Judge Judy nodded. That seems entirely reasonable. Damien snorted. Of course you'd take her side. My side, Judy replied coolly, is wherever the facts lead. And right now, the facts are pointing directly at you. She turned to Bird. Officer, bring up the photo evidence. Bird stepped forward, handing Judy a stack of printed photos. The judge held one up. It showed the fence panel snapped in half, the wood splintered. Is this the fence you kicked? She asked. Damien looked at the photo with a dismissive shrug. Yeah, that's the one. And you still claim the damage wasn't significant? It's just a fence, he said, rolling his eyes. Judy's voice remained level, but the edge grew sharper. It's not just a fence. It is someone's property. Something that belonged to her. Something her husband built. And you destroyed it because you were angry that someone dared ask you to be considerate. He opened his mouth again, and Judy spoke over him. This is the hallmark of a bully. Someone who thinks rules are optional, kindness is weakness, and consequences are for other people. Damien's face tightened. I'm not a bully. Judy raised an eyebrow. Everything you've done today says otherwise. He looked away, jaw shifting unhappily. Now, she said, flipping to the next page, let's discuss the threats. Damien groaned. Come on. Yes, Judy said, we're going to talk about it. You told her you'd teach her a lesson. What exactly was that supposed to mean? It was just something I said, he muttered. Words have intent, Judy countered. Especially when those words are spoken to a 70-year-old woman by a healthy young man full of bravado. That is intimidation. Damien didn't respond. The silence stretched, heavy. Judy spoke again, quieter this time. Mr. Hawkins, whether you realize it or not, this behavior of yours will follow you. If you continue down this path, threats, disrespect, impulsive anger, you're going to end up in a real courtroom. Not a televised one. And in those courtrooms, you don't walk away with a lecture. You walk away with consequences you can't talk your way out of. Damien swallowed. You're at a crossroads, she continued. You can keep acting like nothing is your fault, insulting everyone who challenges you. Or you can take this case as the warning it is. A moment passed. Then she leaned forward again. But before you think this case will end with me simply wagging my finger at you, let me make one thing abundantly clear. You are paying for the damage. Damien grumbled, I can't pay $500. You can, Judy said, and you will. I don't care if you need to sell your sneakers or skip a weekend out with your friends. You caused the damage, and you're going to fix it. But, no excuses, Judy interrupted. He exhaled angrily, voice cracking with frustration. This is stupid. Judy looked unimpressed. What's stupid is thinking you can behave however you want without consequences. Today is your reality check. She turned to Mrs. Peterson. We will absolutely grant the repair amount. Mildred nodded gratefully, tears shimmering in her eyes. But I am also considering something else, Judy added thoughtfully. Damien tensed. What now? Judy looked at him steadily. In addition to the damages, I am considering awarding punitive costs for your behavior. What does that mean? Damien asked, suddenly less confident. It means, Judy said, your disrespect may end up costing you extra. Damien stared at her, stunned. You can do that? Judy tapped her gavel lightly. Oh, I can. And I will, if your attitude doesn't improve immediately. Damien looked genuinely rattled for the first time since walking in. Mrs. Peterson watched quietly, almost as if she were seeing justice unfold before her eyes in slow motion. Judy continued, let me explain something to you, Mr. Hawkins. When you enter a courtroom, any courtroom, you are expected to behave with dignity. You do not sneer. You do not interrupt. You do not insult the plaintiff. And you certainly do not talk back to the judge. Damien didn't speak. Judy leaned closer, lowering her voice. If you continue talking to me the way you have been, you're going to find out just how quickly your arrogance can cost you. The young man looked away again, but his bravado had shrunk considerably. Judy straightened her posture. Now, unless you want to walk out of here owing more than $500, I suggest you rethink your approach. Damien said nothing. His silence was the closest thing to respect he had shown all morning. Judy nodded slightly, satisfied. Good. That's the first wise decision you've made today. But even as the courtroom quieted, everyone knew the tension wasn't fully resolved. Damien's temper simmered beneath the surface, and Judge Judy had more questions to ask. The real confrontation was still coming. For several long seconds, the courtroom sat in a kind of charged stillness. Damien remained rigid, though his shoulders rose and fell with unsteady breaths. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced with a mixture of stubbornness and unease. The audience exchanged knowing glances. Everyone sensed that the confrontation between him and Judge Judy had only reached its midpoint. The storm hadn't peaked yet. Judge Judy cleared her throat lightly, flipping through a few pages of the case file. Now that we've established the damage, she said, we're going to explore something more important. She closed the folder with a firm motion. Your behavior. Damien shifted, crossing his arms in defiance. I already said I didn't mean half the stuff she says I did. Judy didn't even look up. Which half did you mean? He blinked, thrown off. What? You say you didn't mean half of it, she repeated calmly, so which half did you mean? Damien opened his mouth, then closed it again. I don't know. It's not that deep. Judy narrowed her eyes. When your words scare someone, especially someone much older than you, it is that deep. Mrs. Peterson dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Bird stood silently, arms folded, observing Damien like a hawk monitoring its prey. Judge Judy leaned forward. Mr. Hawkins, at any point during that evening, did you consider apologizing? Or even acknowledging that Mrs. Peterson might be frightened by your conduct? He scoffed. Why would I apologize for something I didn't do wrong? You kicked her fence, Judy snapped. Yeah, but that's not, dangerous. You threatened her. He rolled his eyes. I said something, okay? It wasn't literal. Judy shook her head. It doesn't matter. You cannot go around shouting at elderly neighbors and then claim innocence because you didn't take your own threat seriously. That's not how intimidation works. Damien muttered under his breath, people are soft these days. Judy's voice sharpened instantly. People are not soft. You are disrespectful. There's a difference. A few spectators nodded quietly. Damien's hands clenched on the podium. I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm some kind of monster. You're not a monster, Judy replied. But you're behaving like an entitled bully. If you don't like that description, then perhaps you should examine the actions that earned it. He glared at her, but she continued without flinching. Let's go back to the night in question. Judy lifted another page from the file. According to the police statement, they arrived at your house and asked you to lower your voice. They say you were yelling loud enough that half the neighborhood could hear you. Damien shrugged. We were having fun. At 3 a.m, Judy said, incredulous. Yeah, well, it's my house, he retorted. I can do whatever I want. Silence fell like a hammer. Judy stared at him. No, you cannot. You live in a community, not on an island. Your right to have fun does not override everyone else's right to sleep. Damien exhaled hard. This place is full of old people who complain about everything. Mrs. Peterson looked down sadly at her hands, and yet, Judy said, those old people somehow manage to live peacefully with one another. The only person anyone complains about is you. Damien paused, unsure how to respond. You think they're the problem, Judy continued. But the common denominator, Mr. Hawkins, is you. His jaw twitched, but the confidence behind his glare was fading. Judy tapped her pen on the bench. Why are you angry all the time? He looked confused. I'm not angry. You are, she said calmly. Anger is written all over your behavior. Only someone who is constantly irritated walks around kicking fences and screaming at neighbors. Damien scoffed again, a nervous sound. You don't know me. I know enough, she replied. Enough to see that you have no control over your temper. He looked away, tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek, and tempers, she added, destroy opportunities faster than anything. Damien didn't answer. Judy shifted her focus. Mrs. Peterson, has he threatened you before? The elderly woman hesitated. Not directly, Your Honor. But sometimes he stares at me when I'm outside. Mean-looking stares. And his friends laugh at me. Damien groaned. Oh, come on. We weren't laughing at you. But Judy held up a hand. Mr. Hawkins, stop talking. He froze mid-sentence. She looked at Mildred. How often has this happened? Many times, the woman whispered. I stopped gardening in the mornings because I don't want any trouble. Judy's lips pressed into a taut line. You shouldn't have to rearrange your life because your neighbor doesn't know how to behave. She returned her gaze to Damien. This is exactly what bullying looks like. He bristled. I'm not a bully. You intimidate people smaller, older, and more vulnerable than you. That is the definition. Damien's nostrils flared, his temper peeking through again. People just take everything out of context. Judy sighed. No one is taking anything out of context. You're simply refusing to take responsibility. He slammed his hand on the podium. Why does everything think I'm the bad guy? Bird straightened slightly, ready to intervene, but Judy lifted her hand calmly, because, she said slowly, you act like the bad guy. The room fell silent. Damien's face reddened. He stared at the floor, jaw working furiously. You want people to treat you with respect? She asked. Yeah, he muttered, then behave in a way that earns it. He didn't answer as Judy leaned back. Let me tell you a story, Mr. Hawkins. I once handled a case with a young man not too different from you. Same attitude. Same belief that the world owed him something. Do you know where he ended up? Damien looked up reluctantly. Where? In jail, she said bluntly. Because he kept escalating. First it was noise disturbances. Then property damage. Then threats. Eventually, he hurt someone. And he didn't walk into that courtroom with sunglasses and swagger then. He walked in wearing handcuffs. Damien swallowed, visibly uncomfortable now. You think you're invincible because you're young, Judy said. Because you have friends who laugh at your recklessness. Because you confuse hostility with strength. But none of that will help you when life finally catches up. He looked down again, but this time not with annoyance, something closer to worry. Judy softened her tone slightly. You have a choice. You can grow up, learn respect, and build a future you can be proud of. Or you can keep heading down this road and find yourself in a courtroom where I'm not the judge and the outcome is far more severe. Silence expanded through the room once more. Then she leaned forward. But we're not done yet. Damien blinked. There's more? Yes, Judy said. We're going to address your outburst from a moment ago. He tensed. You slammed your hand on the podium. That is unacceptable. I'm sorry, he muttered reluctantly. Not to me, Judy said. To Mrs. Peterson. He blinked again. What? You will apologize to her, Judy said firmly. Right now. Damien's shoulders stiffened. He looked trapped, like a stubborn child forced to eat vegetables. I'm not doing that, he said quietly. Yes, Judy said, you are. He shook his head, the tension skyrocketed. Judge Judy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. If you refuse to apologize, I will award Mrs. Peterson punitive damages on top of repair costs. And I will include an official reprimand for intimidation. Damien's eyes widened. You can't do that. I absolutely can. He clenched his jaw, but fear crept into his eyes. Mr. Hawkins, Judy said softly, you dug yourself into this hole. I'm offering you a ladder. Don't be foolish enough to kick it away. He inhaled through his nose, trying, and failing, to keep his expression neutral. Finally, he turned stiffly toward Mrs. Peterson. The entire room held its breath. He began, voice choking slightly. "I'm sorry." Mrs. Peterson blinked in surprise. "For what, dear?" "For kicking the fence," he said reluctantly, "and—" Judy prompted. Damien swallowed. "And for yelling at you." Mrs. Peterson nodded gently. A strange silence followed. Not tense. Not hostile. Just quiet, as if something in the atmosphere had shifted. Judy nodded. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" Damien didn't answer. But for the first time, he looked less like a defiant troublemaker and more like someone realizing, slowly, that he had crossed a line he wasn't proud of. Judge Judy leaned forward, sensing the turning point. She wasn't done with him yet, but something important had shifted. The confrontation wasn't over, but Damien's stubborn wall had finally cracked. And now, she was going to finish what she started. Damien's apology settled into the room like a warm exhale after a long and exhausting argument. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't eloquent. And it certainly wasn't enthusiastic. But it was real. Mrs. Peterson offered a timid smile, the first hint of relief she'd shown since stepping into the courtroom. Her shoulders relaxed, the tension she had carried like a weight since the incident visibly softening. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to ruin Damien's life. She only wanted to feel safe in her own neighborhood. Judge Judy observed the exchange carefully, her eyes sharp yet oddly calm now. "Good," she said, nodding to herself. "Acknowledging the problem is the beginning of fixing it." Damien shifted uncomfortably. Though he had apologized, he still hovered on uncertain ground, unsure if the hostility had truly dissipated or if another storm was coming. For once, he didn't speak. He didn't mutter. He didn't roll his eyes. He stayed still. It was, perhaps, his wisest choice yet. Judge Judy clasped her hands together. "Now, Mr. Hawkins, we're going to wrap up the legal portion of this case. But before I issue my ruling, I have a few final questions." Damien tensed again. "Okay." Judy glanced toward the plaintiff. "Mrs. Peterson, have there been any other incidents between you and Mr. Hawkins? Any additional conflicts, noise complaints, or property issues?" Mildred hesitated. "Not incidents like this, Your Honor. But there have been several nights when his parties made it hard for me to sleep." "Do you call the police every time?" Judy asked. "Oh no," she said, shaking her head. "Only when I feel scared. Most nights I just put in earplugs and try my best." Damien's lips tightened once again. "I didn't know she could hear it that loud, because you didn't bother to care," Judy cut in. He flinched slightly but didn't argue. "Mrs. Peterson," Judy continued, "if Mr. Hawkins apologizes properly and promises to be more considerate, do you think the two of you could coexist peacefully as neighbors?" Mildred looked at Damien with gentle, weary eyes. "I don't want trouble with anyone. If he respects my space, I'll respect his." Judy nodded. "Fair enough." She turned to Damien. "Now let's talk about what happens next." Damien's chest rose as he took a breath, bracing himself. Judge Judy lifted the contractor's estimate again. "First, you will pay the $540 for the repair. That is non-negotiable." Damien nodded stiffly. "Yeah, okay." "Second," Judy continued, "you will not, under any circumstances, interfere with Mrs. Peterson or approach her in a threatening manner ever again. You will treat her with the same respect you'd want someone to show your own grandmother." Damien swallowed hard. "Okay. I can do that." Judy raised a finger. "Say it clearly." He straightened. "I won't bother her again." "Good." She laid the papers down, but she wasn't finished. "Not yet. Now," she said, voice softening just slightly, "I'm going to speak to you as a human being, not as a judge." Damien blinked. "All right, young people make mistakes," Judy began. "Plenty of them. But what separates adults from overgrown children is the willingness to learn from those mistakes. He nodded slowly. You walk around with anger like it's armor, she said. But anger isn't protection. It's poison. And the person it damages the most is the one carrying it. Damien's jaw loosened a little. He didn't speak, but his eyes shifted downward, not defiant, but contemplative. Judy continued, her tone leveling into something balanced and firm rather than confrontational. You can be better than this. You can be someone your neighbors trust instead of fear. But that requires effort. Respect. Decency. You must decide what kind of person you want to grow into. Damien looked up at her for the first time with no glare, no scoff, no attitude, just listening. Do you understand me? She asked. He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Good, she said. Then start proving it. She glanced at the plaintiff. Mrs. Peterson, do you feel comfortable with this resolution? Mildred smiled delicately. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Judy tapped her pen lightly on the bench. Then I am ready to issue my judgment. The crowd leaned forward instinctively. Judgment for the plaintiff, she declared. In the amount of $540. Mr. Hawkins will pay. Case dismissed. She brought the gavel down with a crisp crack that echoed through the courtroom. The moment it hit, Damien exhaled deeply, shoulders loosening in a way that suggested he'd been holding tension in his body the entire time. Tension he didn't even realize existed until the confrontation ended. But Judge Judy wasn't done. As Bird called for the next case, Judy lifted one finger toward Damien. Mr. Hawkins, she said firmly. He turned around cautiously. Yes? One more thing, she said. He froze like a student called back after class. Judy leaned forward. If I receive another case file with your name on it, any case, any complaint, any report, you will not enjoy the outcome. Let this be your wake-up call. Because I promise you, next time, there won't be a ladder for you to climb out. Damien nodded, his voice barely audible. Yes, ma'am, and don't yes ma'am me today, Judy added with a surprising flicker of humor. Do it tomorrow. And the day after. And every time you feel like kicking something that doesn't belong to you. A small ripple of laughter moved through the room. Even Bird cracked a smile. Damien nodded again, more resolutely this time. I will, Your Honor. Judy gave him a simple nod. Good. Now you may go. Damien turned away from the podium, quieter than anyone had seen him. As he walked past Mrs. Peterson, he hesitated. The cameras caught the moment, a brief pause, a moment of human vulnerability cutting through his hardened exterior. He spoke softly, barely above a whisper. I'll try to be a better neighbor. Mrs. Peterson's eyes warmed. That's all anyone wants. He nodded once more before slowly exiting the courtroom. As the courtroom reset for the next case, the audience buzzed with reflection rather than excitement. This wasn't just another explosive argument or dramatic television moment. This was something meaningful, an encounter where a young man's destructive tendencies had been halted, confronted, and redirected by someone who refused to back down. Judge Judy closed the case folder on her bench. She took a brief moment, her gaze softening, just for a second. To anyone paying attention, it was clear she wasn't simply shutting down a bully. She was trying to prevent one from hardening into someone far worse. Bird approached her with the next case file. Ready for the next one, Judge? She nodded. Bring them in. And just like that, the courtroom moved forward, but the lesson remained hanging in the air, echoing in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. Respect is not optional. Accountability is not negotiable. And maturity begins when excuses end.